Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, be sure to drop your thoughts, feelings, and lessons in the comments below. Like the video and subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Let's get into it. My name is Darius Monroe, and this is not a fairy tale. It is the kind of story men like me, hardworking, steady, and loyal, hope they never have to live. I live it anyway. My wife, Betrayal, cheated on me. Not with a stranger, not with some random guy at a bar, but with a man her own mother selected for her at a charity gala in Dallas, Texas. If that was not enough, she got pregnant and begged me to claim it. I am not telling this for revenge. I am telling it because it happened. People talk about love like it is a movie. Perfect timing, expensive gifts, and flawless endings. I never believed that version. Real love is quiet. It is picking up medicine from a 24-hour pharmacy at 2 in the morning because she is sick. Real love is remembering she hates cilantro and telling the waiter every time, even when it feels repetitive. Real love is driving hours through traffic because she once mentioned craving a specific cupcake. It is not glamorous. It is consistent. That is the love I gave Betrayal, and I thought it was enough. I did not come from money. I did not have a corporate title that impressed people at fancy dinners. What I had were my hands and my habits. When Betrayal had a headache, I made sure the house stayed quiet and brought her water without being asked. When her car had trouble, I left work early, picked her up, and handled it. When her job wore her down, I listened until she could breathe again. I never treated it like a performance. I treated it like marriage. Later, I learned that for Betrayal and her mother, love was something else entirely. Betrayal once mentioned a boutique bakery in Austin that made cupcakes she loved. She said it casually, like it did not matter. I remembered anyway. The next weekend, I drove 3 hours, bought a box tied with a ribbon, and drove back. When I handed it to her, her face lit up, and she hugged me like I had done something extraordinary. To me, it was simple. I was paying attention. Those gestures were not about showing off. They were about building trust. Her family did not see it that way. I ran Monroe Auto, a European repair shop in Dallas. It was not glamorous, but it was mine. I built it the slow way, job by job, mistake by mistake, and year by year. Wealthy clients brought me their overcomplicated cars and expected miracles. I learned how to deliver them. BMWs, Audis, Mercedes, cars that demanded precision and patience. I never inherited this shop. I worked for it. I took pride in it. Betrayal told me she admired that. Her mother treated it like a flaw she could not hide. Dallas is filled with people who measure worth by labels. My customers trusted me with their cars because they knew I was good. Yet Betrayal's mother did not trust me with her daughter because she did not respect work that left grease under fingernails. I could fix a surgeon's Mercedes and still be considered not enough at her dining table. That contrast was always there. It just took me too long to admit it mattered. I thought love would outweigh her mother's judgment. I thought showing up consistently would change what her mother believed about me. It did not. Betrayal was beautiful, but that was not why I fell for her. I fell for her because she seemed warm, quick to laugh, and easy to be around. She worked in marketing, always polished, always composed. At home, she was softer. She stole fries off my plate, leaned into my shoulder, and talked about the future like it was real. For 4 years, she was the center of my decisions. I shaped my plans around her. I believed we were building something lasting. I did not realize that lasting in her family meant approved, and I was never approved. I still remember the early days clearly. Late-night drives with the windows down. Farmers markets on Saturday mornings. Cheap takeout that tasted better because she was smiling across the table. We built routines that felt safe. We laughed at small things. We planned trips we never took. We talked about a home, about a yard, about a life that did not need to impress anyone. I believed those moments were proof we were stable. I believed the foundation was strong. I did not see the cracks forming under us, because I wanted the story to stay simple. Every Friday, I stopped at a flower shop on my way home. I bought white roses with baby's breath because Betrayal loved them. The owner learned my routine and had them ready. Betrayal always smiled when she saw them, kissed my cheek, and placed them in the same vase on the counter. I did not do it to be praised. I did it because it was my way of showing consistency. In my mind, a marriage grew from small promises kept. In Brielle's mother's mind, flowers were a cheap substitute for status. I pictured our future in ordinary scenes: Sunday mornings, coffee, quiet laughter, kids in the yard, and a house that felt like ours. I thought Patience would earn her mother's respect over time. I believed that if I stayed steady, her mother would eventually see that I loved Brielle well. I told myself that love was louder than judgment. I did not understand that Brielle's mother did not measure love by loyalty. She measured it by access. She measured it by the kind of man she could brag about. And she did not think a mechanic was a brag. Brielle's mother, Yvette Carter, lived for appearances. She dressed like every lunch was a public event. Her hair was always styled, her jewelry always chosen carefully, and her smile always practiced. She spoke as if she belonged to a higher tier, and everyone else was supposed to notice. From the first dinner at her home, I felt her evaluation. She did not ask about my values. She asked questions that pointed to money. She did not listen for character. She listened for prestige. I thought she might soften if she saw how I treated Brielle. Yvette did not soften. Family dinners at the Carter's house felt like a courtroom. The lighting was perfect, the plates were arranged with precision, and the conversation always circled back to achievements. Yvette disguised insults as advice. She once leaned forward and said, "Darius, you might want to clean under your nails a little better." I had been working all day. I washed my hands. A little grease remained because that is what the work looks like. To me, that was honest. To her, it was unacceptable. Brielle squeezed my hand under the table, apologized later, and said nothing in the moment. When Yvette could not criticize my hands, she criticized my truck. I drove an F-150. It was reliable and practical, and it carried what I needed. Yvette looked at it like it embarrassed her driveway. At one dinner, she glanced outside and said, "Have you ever considered something more professional?" She did not say the name, but she did not have to. Her eyes shifted toward a glossy luxury car parked nearby, the kind she admired. I smiled and let it pass. Inside, the comment stayed with me. It was never about transportation. It was about her ranking system. Yvette started mentioning Trayvon Langston in every conversation like she was training us to accept him. Trayvon was a real estate developer in Houston, mid-30s, always polished, always surrounded by the glow of money. Yvette spoke about him like he was a prize. Trayvon just acquired another property. Trayvon has such a sharp mind. Trayvon's plans are so clear. Then she looked at Brielle as she spoke, like she was planting an idea. The comparisons were subtle at first, then direct. I was not competing with a man. I was competing with a plan Yvette had already chosen. Trayvon became an invisible guest at every meal. If Brielle talked about work, Yvette mentioned Trayvon's firm. If Brielle talked about travel, Yvette mentioned Trayvon's penthouse views. If someone mentioned investments, Yvette hinted that Trayvon understood real stability. I sat there listening to my replacement being described as if he already belonged in the family. Brielle would roll her eyes later and whisper, "You know how my mom is." But she never told her mother to stop. She never drew a line. Her silence did not feel harmless. It felt like permission, even if she did not call it that. After dinners, Brielle would squeeze my hand in the truck and say, "I am sorry." She wants what is best. The apology was soft, but it did not change anything. I needed her to speak when it mattered, not after. I needed her to protect our marriage in the moment, not clean it up later. I told myself she was trying to keep peace. I told myself she felt caught in the middle. I told myself patience was a strength. I did not want to admit that her silence was a decision. It was easier to believe she was passive than to accept she would not choose me publicly. I stayed quiet because I thought consistency would win. I had fixed enough stubborn engines to believe persistence solved problems. I told myself that if I showed up, if I kept treating Brielle well, if I kept being reliable, Yvette would eventually have to acknowledge it. I believed love would force respect. I did not realize that silence does not teach respect. It teaches someone what they can do to you without consequence. Yvette learned that she could humiliate me openly and I would keep showing up. Brielle learned that she could apologize privately and avoid conflict publicly. That pattern shaped everything that followed. I carried the belief that love conquers all. It sounded noble. It helped me swallow insult after insult. When Yvette praised Trayvon, I told myself it was noise. When she mocked my work, I told myself love would outlast her opinion. When Brielle stayed silent, I convinced myself it was temporary. But love does not conquer everything if one person keeps moving the goalposts and the other person keeps accepting it. My belief was not armor. It was fragile. Each stage comparison, each polite insult, and each quiet apology added another crack. I did not see it because I was committed to the idea of forever. The coincidences started. Brielle and I would go to lunch downtown and Trayvon would happen to pass the cafe. We would go to a farmer's market and he would be there near the produce. Brielle had a work mixer and Trayvon showed up, smiling like he belonged. The first time, I shrugged it off. Dallas is large and people overlap. The second time, I narrowed my eyes. The third time, I knew it was not random. Yvette reacted the same way every time, delighted, surprised, and pleased. "What are the odds?" she would say, as if she was not writing the script herself. Sunday brunch used to be our quiet space. We picked a spot, ate slowly, and talked without pressure. Then Yvette insisted on joining. "It will be nice," she said. The first time, I agreed to keep peace. Trayvon appeared, of course. Yvette arranged seating like she was setting a stage, placing Trayvon across from Brielle. He talked about deals while Brielle asked questions and laughed a little too eagerly. Yvette watched with satisfaction. I stirred my coffee and felt like a guest in my own marriage. That brunch was not about family time. It was about recruitment, and I was the obstacle they wanted to remove. Then Brielle's words changed. One night, while we watched television, she asked, "Have you considered diversifying your income streams?" It did not sound like her. It sounded like Trayvon. I had heard him use the same phrase at brunch. Soon she asked about a 5-year plan in the same tone, as if she was testing me. When I talked about expanding the shop, she replied with language about long-term growth. I answered calmly, but inside I felt the shift. It was not just that Trayvon was around. It was that his thinking was entering my home through my wife. That realization made my chest tighten every night. One evening, after another chance encounter, I finally said it plainly. "Brielle, your mother is trying to set you up. This is matchmaking." Brielle looked at me as if I was being unreasonable. "You are overthinking," she said. "Trayvon is just friendly." 2 weeks later, she told me Trayvon had ended his relationship and wanted to focus on work. The timing was too perfect. I pointed it out again. Brielle sighed and said, "Why can't you just be confident enough not to feel threatened?" That line hit harder than Yvette's insults. It turned my concern into a character flaw. After that, I questioned myself. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, trying to decide if I was seeing patterns that did not exist. I told myself I might be insecure. I told myself I might be misreading people. But my instincts would not settle. I noticed how Brielle's eyes followed Trayvon when he spoke. I noticed how her laugh sounded different around him. I noticed how she used his language and asked his questions. I also noticed how Yvette watched it all like a proud manager watching a plan succeed. Doubt is dangerous because it makes you silence the part of you that recognizes the truth. The breaking point came with the Houston Children's Hospital Charity Gala. Yvette treated it like a crown event. She talked about the guest list, the table, the pictures, and the connections. The same week, my older brother Malik Monroe called me at 2 in the morning. His gambling problem had turned serious. He owed money to men who did not negotiate politely. He was scared, and for the first time in a long time, he asked for help. I could not ignore him. I told Brielle I could not attend the gala. Her disappointment was immediate, and it was not about me. It was about her mother. Brielle hesitated, then said, "Okay, I will go with my parents, but you owe me." I heard the words, but I focused on Malik. That night, I drove him to the airport and made sure he got on a flight out of Texas. I sat in the terminal watching the gate, making sure he was safe. Meanwhile, Brielle was getting dressed for a ballroom full of champagne, chandeliers, and the people her mother wanted to impress. She sent pictures, her smiling beside Yvette, her holding a drink, her posing like everything was perfect. Her eyes looked rehearsed. Her last text came late. Having fun. Miss you. See you tomorrow. Brielle never used that many exclamation points. The next morning, I expected Brielle to ask about Malik. She did not. By afternoon, she still had not called. I texted. No response. I called. Voicemail. When she finally answered the following day, her voice sounded distant. I have been sick, she said. Probably food poisoning. It did not make sense, but I did not challenge her yet. I offered to come over. She said she did not want me to catch it. That week, Brielle became a different person. Short calls, cold texts, public meetups instead of home time. She looked tired, but it did not look like an illness. It looked like guilt. The distance grew. Her answers were clipped, as if she was afraid of saying too much. Her phone stayed face down. When it buzzed, her shoulders tightened and she forced a smile. She claimed headaches and nausea. The excuses changed every few days. We stopped spending weekends together. When I asked directly what was happening, she insisted she was just stressed. I wanted to believe her. I did not want to connect the dots. But the timeline kept pointing back to the gala night I missed. I pictured the ballroom, the drinks, the smiles, and the man Yvette kept placing in our path. My gut warned me, and I finally listened. On a Tuesday evening, Brielle walked into my shop unannounced. She never did that without calling. She stood near my toolbox, pale, fidgeting, looking everywhere except at me. Then she said, "Darius, I'm pregnant." The words hit like metal dropping onto concrete. For a moment, my mind froze. 4 years together, careful, and now this. She rushed through details. 6 weeks, the doctor, the sickness, the surprise. She tried to frame it like a blessing. I nodded and asked questions like I was happy. Inside, I was doing math. 6 weeks lined up with the gala. My stomach tightened because the dates did not feel random. Brielle repeated 6 weeks like she had rehearsed it. She watched my face, waiting for excitement. I kept my expression calm and asked how she felt. She relaxed, as if I had passed a test. But I could not stop calculating. 6 weeks ago was a gala night. The night I was in an airport saving my brother. The night Brielle was in a ballroom where Trayvon had every reason to be present. I did not accuse her. I did not shout. I simply listened. My mind was already moving toward proof, because I had learned something about lies. They multiply when you confront them without evidence. 2 years earlier, after a short breakup, I made a private decision. I wanted kids someday, but not then. I went to a clinic in Dallas and had a vasectomy. I kept it quiet, not to deceive Brielle, but because I wanted us to choose family planning together when the time was right. I thought I could reverse it later if we were ready. That secret became the loudest truth of my life the moment Brielle said she was pregnant. I could not father a child at that time. The baby could not be mine. Her claim was not confusing. It was a plan. I smiled, told Brielle we would handle it together, and even offered to attend her next appointment. She looked relieved. Inside, something shut down. I did not need a DNA test to know the truth, but I still needed evidence to protect myself. Brielle would deny everything if I confronted her. Yvette would paint me as unstable. Trayvon would disappear and pretend he was not involved. I needed cold proof, messages, records, timestamps. I decided to move the way I moved in my shop. You do not guess. You diagnose. Then you fix the right problem. My problem was not only betrayal. It was the scheme built around it. I started watching details I used to ignore. Brielle guarded her phone like it contained a secret she could not afford to lose. She tilted the screen away from me. She left the room to answer calls. If I asked who it was, she answered too quickly. At night, when she slept beside me, I lay awake listening to the smallest sounds, wondering which part of my marriage had been real. I did not feel dramatic. I felt focused. I had built a business by noticing patterns and refusing to be fooled by surface appearances. Now I applied that same discipline to my wife. I told myself the truth would hurt less once it was clear. The first crack came unexpectedly. Brielle left her phone charging on the nightstand while she showered. A notification lit the screen, voicemail sync. I tapped it because I could not live in uncertainty anymore. Brielle's voice played, shaky and panicked, speaking to someone named Monica. I messed up, she said. I slept with Trayvon at the gala, and now I'm pregnant. Darius will leave if he finds out. What am I supposed to do? Maybe if I time it right, maybe he'll think it's his. I went cold. My hands were steady, but my chest burned. I replayed it to make sure I heard correctly. I had. The voicemail alone could have ended everything. But I kept looking because I needed the entire shape of the betrayal. A few nights later, Brielle's phone buzzed again. A message thread synced through the cloud. I opened it and saw Yvette texting with Evelyn Langston, Trayvon's mother. Evelyn wrote, Trayvon is very interested in Brielle. We should create more opportunities. Yvette replied, I agree. Darius is kind, but he is not security. Brielle needs real stability. Trayvon is perfect. The words felt clinical, like a business plan. They were not talking about love. They were talking about replacement. I took screenshots of every line, including dates and names. At that point, I had the truth in multiple forms. Brielle's own admission, Yvette's plotting, and the timeline. Still, I did not confront her immediately. A confrontation behind closed doors would let them twist the story. I wanted a moment where truth could not be edited. I wanted witnesses. I wanted no escape route. If Yvette liked performances, I would give her one she could not control. I collected everything into a folder, the voicemail, the screenshots, and my certified medical records. I went back to the clinic and requested stamped copies with signatures and dates. I organized it like a case file, because I needed it to stand up in any argument they tried to build. Then I chose a stage. I booked a private table at Chamberlain Steakhouse in Dallas, the kind of place Yvette loved because it looked expensive and made her feel important. I wanted her to be comfortable. I wanted her to be confident. I called Brielle's father, Harold Carter, the only person in that family who ever seemed grounded. I told him I wanted to host a family dinner to celebrate the pregnancy properly. Harold sounded genuinely happy. He said Yvette would love it. I agreed and smiled to myself. The trap was set. They thought they were coming to a celebration. They were walking into the moment their lies collapsed. On the day of the dinner, I moved calmly. I shaved, got a haircut, and put on the charcoal suit Brielle once picked for me. The one she said made me look like I belonged in professional spaces. I polished my boots. I checked my folder twice. I loaded the voicemail onto a small Bluetooth speaker and tested it. I did not want any technical problems. I was not going in angry. I was going in clay. When I looked in the mirror, I did not see a man begging for respect. I saw a man who finally understood he did not need permission to be treated fairly. I left my house with my evidence and my composure. When I arrived, the Carter family was already seated. Harold shook my hand warmly. Brielle looked nervous and hopeful, fidgeting with her napkin. Yvette was glowing, her jewelry catching the light. She looked at me like she expected a ring or a promise she could brag about later. The waiter poured wine. Everyone made small talk. It almost felt normal, and that made the situation feel even sharper. Yvette's confidence was obvious. Brielle's tension was obvious. I could feel them waiting for me to confirm their preferred story. I let them wait. I did not come to beg for my place. I came to end their narrative. Dinner started with polite conversation. Harold asked about the shop. Someone complimented the restaurant. Brielle nodded along, smiling carefully. Then Yvette leaned in and, right on schedule, mentioned Trayvon. You know, Trayvon just closed another deal in Houston, she said, like she was sharing exciting news the table should celebrate. She said his name with pride, as if it belonged in our marriage. Brielle's cheeks flushed, and her eyes dropped to her plate. I watched her and felt the confirmation. Even now, she could not look me in the eye with Trayvon's name on the table. I did not interrupt. I waited for the perfect moment, because timing matters when you end a lie. While Yvette continued talking about Trayvon's stability, I reached into my jacket and pulled out the small Bluetooth speaker. I placed it in the center of the table, between the bread basket and Harold's glass. Conversation stopped. Brielle's fork froze. Yvette tilted her head. Harold asked what it was. I smiled and said, just a little ambience. Something to set the mood. Yvette chuckled like I was trying to impress her. I paired my phone, heard the confirmation tone, and looked around the table. The silence stretched. Then I said, I made a playlist. It captures how I've been feeling lately. With one tap, Brielle's voice filled the air. I slept with Trayvon at the gala and now I'm pregnant. The speaker played. Darius is going to leave if he finds out. Maybe if I time it right, he'll think it's his. The restaurant went quiet around us. Harold's face changed immediately, as if he was seeing his daughter for the first time. A relative gasped softly. Brielle turned pale, eyes wide, lips trembling. Yvette lifted her wine glass halfway and stopped mid-motion, frozen. I stayed still. I did not need to accuse Brielle. Her own voice did the work. When the voicemail ended, the silence was heavy, and no one knew what to say because the truth left no room for explanation. Yvette tried to recover first. She forced a laugh that sounded brittle, then started to speak as if context could erase words. Her voice cracked. Harold looked at her like he wanted to understand but could not. Brielle stared at the tablecloth as if she could disappear into it. I did not fill the silence. I wanted them to sit in what I had been carrying. After a long moment, I reached into my jacket and placed printed screenshots on the table. I slid them toward Harold. If the voicemail was not clear enough, I said calmly, here's the planning behind it. Harold picked them up and began reading, his brows tightening with every line. I read the messages aloud, so there was no way to minimize them. Trayvon is very interested in Brielle, Evelyn wrote. We should arrange more opportunities. Then Yvette's reply, I agree. Darius is kind, but he is not security. Brielle needs real stability. Trayvon is perfect. Harold's hand shook as he lowered the pages. His face turned red with anger that looked more like pain. Brielle's breathing became uneven. Yvette's eyes darted around the table, searching for an exit. She did not find one. Harold slammed his hand on the table hard enough to rattle glasses. He stared at Yvette, then at Brielle, and his voice sounded like a man losing the last of his patience. You did this? Harold asked Yvette. Yvette started to explain. She used words like help and security, as if those words could clean up what she had done. Harold cut her off. You call this security, he said. You pushed her into an affair. You humiliated Darius for years. You treated marriage like a transaction. Yvette tried again, but her voice grew thin. The restaurant was still watching. Brielle covered her face and cried quietly, shoulders shaking. Harold looked at his daughter with a mixture of disappointment and grief. He looked back at Yvette with something colder. I let him speak because he deserved to. Still, my last piece of proof was waiting, and I did not plan to leave without placing it on the table. I opened my manila folder and slid the stamped medical records forward. Here's the part none of you expected, I said, steady. 2 years ago, I had a vasectomy at a Dallas clinic. Certified records. Dates. Signatures. Brielle's hands dropped from her face slowly. Her eyes were glassy, and her mouth opened as if she wanted to deny it but could not. I kept my voice level. So the baby you are carrying cannot be mine. The statement did not sound emotional, but it was final. The truth landed like a weight no one could lift. Harold went silent, staring at the papers. Yvette's lips moved without sound. Brielle looked like the floor had disappeared under her. The table became chaos in quiet forms. Yvette began offering excuses that did not connect to anything real. Brielle cried harder, shaking her head. Harold's breathing was heavy, and he looked older at that moment. I did not raise my voice. I did not insult anyone. I simply stood, placed 2 crisp bills beside my plate, and said, This covers mine and Hayes. I pushed my chair back, the sound loud in the silence. I looked at Brielle one last time. Then I looked at Yvette, who had built her entire identity on appearances. You wanted money over loyalty, I said evenly. Now you have what you chose. Then I walked out into the Dallas night and did not look back. I had not made it home before my phone rang. Harold's name lit the screen. I answered, and his voice was heavy. He apologized, not once but repeatedly. He said he should have stopped Yvette years ago. I could hear arguing in the background, Yvette's voice sharp, Brielle crying. Then Harold said something I did not expect. I filed for divorce this morning, he said. After 40+ years, I cannot look at her the same. I sat in my truck in silence, realizing the blast radius was larger than I thought. Yvette's scheme did not only destroy my marriage, it cracked her own, and Harold was finally choosing himself the way I had chosen myself at that table. Any doubt about Trayvon disappeared immediately. The man Yvette praised like a solution vanished when the truth became public. No calls, no visits, no "we will handle this together." Rumors spread that his mother demanded he protect the family image. Whatever the reason, he left Brielle alone. He had enjoyed the fantasy and disappeared from the consequences. Brielle had treated him like an upgrade, but he treated her like a risk. Yvette had bet everything on his money, and he refused to pay the price of their scandal. That reality was harsh, but it was honest. Trayvon was not a savior. He was a man who preferred control and distance. When the situation became complicated, he chose escape. Brielle's life collapsed quickly after that. She quit her marketing job, unable to focus, unable to face people. Bills piled up. Friends avoided her. The apartment she once took pride in became a reminder of what she had ruined. She moved back in with Yvette, and their home turned into a small world full of regret and blame. Yvette, who once lived for social invitations, saw them disappear. People in her circles started whispering about her role. She had not only raised a scandal, she had authored it. The same women who used to smile at her lunches now kept their distance. Reputation, the thing she worshipped, became the thing that punished her. Watching that from afar did not feel like victory. It felt like consequences doing their work without my involvement. For years, Yvette was the woman with the perfect image. After Chamberlain's, the story spread fast. People gossiped in boutiques, at charity events, and in private group chats. The details changed, but the core stayed the same. Yvette pushed her daughter into a man's arms, tried to trap me with a pregnancy, and got exposed publicly. Invitations slowed, then stopped. Old friends smiled politely and moved away. Harold's divorce filing made it official. The woman who insisted on security lost her own. The irony was obvious to everyone but her. And the worst part for Yvette was that she could not control the narrative anymore. She had built her life on managing how things looked. That night ruined her control. Leaving the restaurant felt like stepping out of a building on fire. For months, I had breathed smoke without admitting it. Yvette's judgment, Brielle's silence, the constant pressure to prove myself. One night, I broke the walls and walked out. I did not feel joy. I felt relief, the kind that comes when the worst has happened and you survived it. I had lost the marriage I thought would last, but I had also escaped a future built on manipulation. I drove home, parked, and sat in silence. I realized something plain. I could not fix what Brielle and Yvette had broken, because they had broken it intentionally. That clarity was painful, but it was also freeing. After the fallout, I did what I knew how to do. I worked. The shop became my steady ground. Tools made sense. Engines did not lie. If something failed, it failed for a reason you could find. My crew closed ranks around me. My lead mechanic, Terrence Wade, did not ask for details. He simply said, "You did what you had to do." His wife, Nia, sent over food one night and said, "You deserve peace." They did not pity me. They respected that I refused to be used. Work kept coming in. Customers still trusted me. I took pride in each repair because it reminded me I was capable. Betrayal made me feel shaken, but work reminded me I could rebuild structure with my own hands. The first weeks were quiet, but the quiet was different than loneliness. It was not empty. It was calm. I stopped checking my phone every few minutes. I stopped rehearsing arguments in my head. I stopped trying to predict what Yvette would say next. My body slowly relaxed. I slept better. I ate more regularly. I noticed small things again, like the way morning light hit the shop floor, or the way customers smiled when their car ran smoothly again. I did not try to rush healing. I simply kept living. Some days I felt anger. Some days I felt sadness. But I no longer felt confused. I knew exactly what happened. That certainty, as painful as it was, helped me move forward. People asked questions, but I kept my answers simple. The marriage ended, I said. I am focused on work. I did not need to share every detail to be believed. The people who mattered could see the change in my face. They could see the relief. My sister called and told me I looked lighter, even over video. My brother Malik, finally stable, apologized for the way his crisis overlapped with the gala and said he would make it right in his own time. I told him the truth. Saving him was not my regret. My regret was trusting a system that treated my loyalty like something they could exploit. That was a lesson I carried, and I promised myself I would never ignore those warning signs again. Months later, a woman named Dr. Simone Lawson became part of my routine in an unexpected way. She was a veterinarian who brought her older Honda to my shop for maintenance. I had seen her before, but I had never paid attention beyond the work order. One afternoon, she stayed while I explained the repairs. She asked questions and listened, not like someone testing me, but like someone who respected what I knew. She laughed easily, and her eyes stayed honest. When she noticed grease on my hands, she did not flinch. She smiled and said, "We both do messy work that matters." The comment landed softly, but it stayed with me because it felt normal and kind. I realized I had been living around people who treated honest work like an embarrassment. Simone treated it like a reality. Simone and I started talking more. No floating games, no hidden motives. Just conversation. She told me about long nights at her clinic, about worried pet owners, and about the pressure of being responsible for lives that cannot speak. I told her about the shop, about customers, and about the satisfaction of solving a problem correctly. It was simple. We grabbed coffee. We went for walks. We ate dinner without performing for anyone. There was no Yvette hovering in the background. There was no measuring. That alone felt like a new kind of safety. I did not rush into labeling it. I just noticed how calm I felt around her. In my old marriage, calm had become rare. With Simone, calm showed up naturally. Being with Simone taught me something I should have learned earlier. Love does not demand you constantly prove your worth to someone else's standards. Love shows up. It is consistent. It is respectful. Simone did not ask about my status. She asked about my day. She did not compare me to other men. She treated me like a whole person. I found myself doing the same for her, not out of obligation, but because it felt right. I tightened a belt in her car so she could get to work safely. She brought me coffee when I had been at the shop late. We did not make grand speeches. We handled life together in small ways. That was the love I thought I had with Betrayal, but now I saw the difference. With Betrayal, my love was tolerated until a better option appeared. With Simone, love was mutual and steady. I never told Simone every detail immediately. I did not want to build a new relationship on old pain. But she noticed scars without demanding explanations. When I was quiet, she did not push. When I was tense, she asked what I needed. That patience felt unfamiliar. One evening, I told her the basics. My marriage ended because of betrayal and manipulation. I told her I had learned hard lessons about silence and control. She listened, then said, "I am sorry you lived that, but I am glad you refused to stay in it." She did not romanticize my pain. She respected my decision. That response mattered. I had spent too long around people who minimized my instincts. Simone treated my instincts like they were worth trusting. About 6 months after the dinner, Betrayal showed up at my shop. She was visibly pregnant, tired, and anxious. She wore one of my old hoodies, the kind she used to borrow and never return. She stood at the doorway like she was waiting for permission to enter my life again. "Darius," she said softly, "can we talk?" She said she made a mistake. She said she still loved me. She said we could fix it. She even suggested we could raise the baby together. I did not shout. I did not insult her. I simply set down my wrench, wiped my hands, and looked at her directly. I told her the truth she avoided. "You loved me when it was easy. When it got hard, you chose someone else." Brielle's eyes filled with tears and she reached out. But I stepped back. "I'm not carrying this anymore," I said. She tried to explain, but explanations do not undo decisions. She tried to blame her mother, but I reminded her she had her own voice and chose not to use it. I told her plainly, "You had chances to protect this marriage. You did not." She stood there shaking, and for a moment I could see the person I once loved. Then I remembered the voicemail, the plan, and the way she tried to trap me with another man's child. I did not say it with cruelty. I said it with finality. "Goodbye, Brielle. I turned away and returned to my work. The shop door closed behind her, and the sound felt like closure. After Brielle left, I sat in my office for a long moment. I did not feel triumphant. I felt settled. I thought about all the times I had swallowed disrespect because I believed endurance was love. I thought about how often I had accepted Brielle's apologies instead of requiring her protection. I thought about how Yvette's plan worked because I kept trying to win approval from a person who never intended to give it. I did not blame myself for being loyal. I blamed myself for confusing loyalty with self-erasure. That was my correction. I promised myself I would never again remain silent at my own expense. I also promised myself I would never build my life around someone else's mother's expectations. My life belongs to me. Harold called me later to say Brielle had told him she went to see me. He did not ask me to take her back. He said he understood why I would not. He sounded tired. Divorce had changed him. He told me he was living in a smaller place now. Quieter. Simpler. He said he regretted not defending me earlier. I told him I appreciated the apology, but I also told him something honest. You cannot protect adult choices, Harold. You can only confront them. He paused and said, I know. We ended the call with mutual respect. That conversation mattered because it reminded me that not everyone in that family was cruel. Some were simply too passive for too long. I understood that, because I had been passive too. The difference was I finally stopped. In the months that followed, I learned how to live without constant tension. I invested more into my business. I hired another mechanic. I upgraded equipment. I stopped worrying about impressing anyone at fancy tables and focused on building real security the right way. Security is not a man in a tailored suit. Security is integrity, savings, consistency, and trust. I had been providing that all along. Yvette simply refused to recognize it because it did not look like her fantasy. That was her loss. I realized that the people who judge honest work are often the same people who cannot survive without the labor of others. They just prefer not to acknowledge that dependence. I did not need their respect anymore. My work spoke for itself, and my peace mattered more than their approval. Simone and I became steady. We did not rush into big promises. We built trust in small, repeatable ways. We talked about boundaries. We talked about family. We talked about what we wanted in the next 5 years, but not as a test. It was simply planning. I told her I believed in long-term effort, and she told me she believed in long-term honesty. That alignment was quiet, but it was strong. One day, she visited the shop and brought lunch. Terrence teased me lightly, and I laughed. It felt normal. That was the point. The biggest difference between my old life and my new one was that my new life did not require constant defense. It required presence. Simone never asked me to shrink so someone else could feel powerful. She asked me to be myself. That request was simple, and it was healing. Sometimes, late at night, I still thought about the gala. I pictured how easily my marriage had been redirected by a woman chasing status. I pictured Brielle choosing silence at dinners, then choosing Trayvon in a ballroom. I let myself feel the sadness without turning it into longing. There's a difference. Sadness acknowledges that something mattered. Longing ignores why it ended. I refused to ignore the truth. I also refused to turn my pain into obsession. I had seen men do that. They live inside betrayal until it becomes their entire identity. I would not do that. I kept moving forward because forward was the only direction that respected what I survived. I did not need revenge. Reality had handled it. My job was to live better. People sometimes asked if I would ever forgive Brielle. I told them forgiveness and access are different. I could forgive her without reopening my life to her. I did not want to punish her. I wanted to protect myself. Forgiveness does not erase consequences. It simply removes poison from your own chest. I did not know if I had fully forgiven her yet, but I knew I had released the need to explain myself to her. She already knew what she did. She just wanted relief from what it cost her. That relief was not mine to provide. She had chosen to build her future on deception. Now she had to live with what deception creates. I could not save her from that without betraying myself again. I had already done that for 4 years. I was done. Yvette's world continued to shrink. I heard updates through mutual acquaintances. She lost committee roles. People stopped returning calls. The same circle she used to dominate began treating her like a caution sign. I did not celebrate it, but I did not pity her either. She had spent years treating human relationships like transactions. When her own transaction failed, she discovered that social status is fragile. It disappears quickly when people decide you are inconvenient. That was the lesson she never wanted to learn. The lesson I learned was different. The approval of people like Yvette is never worth the cost. You pay too much of yourself for too little in return. Malik eventually returned to Texas, steady and sober. He came to my shop and stood quietly for a while before speaking. I know my crisis overlapped with everything, he said. I am sorry. I told him I did not regret helping him. I told him the gala revealed what was already in my marriage. If Brielle had been loyal, nothing would have happened. Malik nodded, and I saw shame and gratitude mixed together. We talked for a long time. For the first time in years, he looked like a man willing to grow. That mattered to me. Betrayal teaches you to pay attention to choices. Malik was choosing differently. Brielle had not. That contrast made my path feel even clearer. I began speaking up more in general. Not loudly, not dramatically, but consistently. If someone disrespected my workers, I corrected it. If a customer tried to bargain unfairly, I set limits. If a friend made a joke that crossed a line, I addressed it. I realized how much my old silence had trained people to push. Silence is not peace if it requires you to swallow yourself. It is surrender. I had surrendered piece by piece at those family dinners, thinking I was being noble. I was being convenient. I stopped being convenient. That decision improved everything. Not only my relationships, but my sense of self. I was not angry all the time. I was simply Clay. Clarity is powerful because it leaves less room for manipulation. Simone noticed the change and smiled one night as we cleaned up after dinner. You look like you believe in yourself now, she said. I asked what she meant. She said, you talk like you trust your instincts. I thought about it and realized she was right. In my old marriage, I constantly doubted myself because Brielle and Yvette framed my concern as insecurity. They taught me to question what I saw. Now I could see plainly without shame. If something felt wrong, I listened. If something felt right, I allowed it. That balance made life simpler. It also made love simpler. I did not need to be chosen by someone who kept scanning for upgrades. I needed to be respected by someone who valued me as I was. Simone did that effortlessly. Over time, I stopped replaying the dinner at Chamberlain's in my mind. At first, it felt like a movie scene that I could not stop watching. Later, it became a memory with a lesson. The lesson was not expose them. The lesson was do not let the lie grow. If I had demanded respect earlier, the story might have ended sooner. If I had required Brielle to defend our marriage in real time, I would have learned faster where I stood. That was a painful realization because it meant I had participated in my own slow erosion. But it was also empowering because it meant I could prevent it in the future. I cannot rewrite what happened, but I can refuse to repeat it. That is how you heal, by changing your patterns, not by rewriting the past. I saw one of Yvette's friends at a gas station once. She recognized me and looked uncomfortable. She did not apologize. She did not ask questions. She simply said, that was a lot. I nodded and said, it was. Then I got into my truck and drove away. I realized how strange it was that people will watch a man be disrespected for years, then feel awkward when he finally stops accepting it. They preferred me quiet because it kept their world smooth. Truth makes a mess, and people fear mess even when the mess is necessary. I stopped caring about their comfort. My life is not designed for other people's convenience. It is designed for my integrity and peace. One afternoon, I received a message from Brielle. It was short and emotional. She said she was sorry. She said she hoped I found happiness. I read it once and did not respond. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because responding would invite conversation, and conversation would invite manipulation, even if she did not intend it. I wished her no harm. I simply refused to reopen a door I had already closed. Some endings must stay. I deleted the message and went back to work. That choice was not cold. It was disciplined. I learned that you can care about someone's humanity while still refusing their access to your life. That distinction is part of maturity. Later, I told Simone about the message. She listened and said, "You do not owe her comfort." Her words were simple, but they landed with weight. In my old marriage, I was trained to prioritize everyone else's comfort, especially Yvette's. I was trained to shrink so the room stayed calm. Simone did not ask me to shrink. She asked me to be honest about what I needed. I realized I had been starving for that kind of relationship. A relationship where my boundaries were not treated like an inconvenience. A relationship where honesty was not labeled insecurity. Those differences sound small until you live them. Then you realize they change everything. I stopped trying to be enough in someone else's game and started building a life where I could breathe. When I look back now, I see the story clearly. I loved Betrayal with a steady effort. I tried to build a marriage on loyalty and consistency. Yvette treated that effort like a temporary placeholder until a wealthier man could be installed. Betrayal allowed it because she wanted approval more than she wanted protection for our marriage. Trayvon participated because he enjoyed the access until it demanded responsibility. The scheme worked for one night, and then it failed because truth does not stay buried forever. My role in the story is not perfect. I stayed too long. I stayed quiet too often. But when I finally saw the truth, I stopped pretending. I gathered evidence. I ended the lie publicly where it could not be rewritten. Then I walked away. That decision saved me. Real love is not a ring, a gala, or a table at an expensive restaurant. Real love is not the approval of people who measure worth by image. Real love does not ask you to accept humiliation to keep peace. Real love does not require you to compete with a plan someone else already chose. Real love is respect. Real love is protection. Real love is honesty even when honesty is uncomfortable. With Betrayal, love became conditional, weighed against status, and diluted by silence. With Simone, love became simple again. Two people showing up consistently, speaking clearly, and choosing each other without an audience. That difference is not poetic. It is practical. It is the difference between a home and a stage. I no longer live on a stage. I also learned that betrayal is rarely a single moment. It is often a series of small permissions. Yvette permissioned herself to insult me. Betrayal permissioned herself to stay silent. Trayvon permissioned himself to hover. I permissioned myself to tolerate it because I believed endurance was loyalty. When you understand that, you stop waiting for a dramatic sign. You start paying attention to patterns. Patterns are the truth long before the confession arrives. If your partner refuses to defend you, that is a pattern. If someone's family treats you like a temporary solution, that is a pattern. If your relationship becomes a performance instead of a partnership, that is a pattern. I ignored patterns until the consequences became undeniable. I do not ignore patterns anymore. Today, my shop is stronger. My mind is calmer. My relationships are clearer. I still believe in love, but I believe in the kind that protects both people, not the kind that consumes one person to satisfy another person's image. I learned that money can buy comfort, but it cannot buy character. Status can get you into a room, but it cannot keep you honest. Yvette chased appearances and lost her real foundation. Betrayal chased approval and lost her marriage. Trayvon chased convenience and ran from responsibility. I chased loyalty and learned to demand it in return. That is the difference. I do not regret loving. I regret tolerating disrespect in the name of love. Love should never require that trade. If there's a final lesson, it is this: do not confuse quiet suffering with strength. Strength is clarity. Strength is boundaries. Strength is leaving when you are being used. I used to think love meant staying no matter what. Now I know love also means protecting yourself from people who call your loyalty a weakness. You can be kind without being available. You can be patient without being passive. You can be devoted without being disposable. When I walked out of that restaurant, I left behind a future built on lies. I walked toward a future built on truth, even if it was lonely at first. Then it became peaceful, and peace is worth more than any social approval. I started this story by saying it was not a fairy tale. It is not. Fairy tales end with applause and perfect endings. Real life ends with choices and consequences. Mine ended with me choosing myself. Betrayal chose betrayal, then tried to hand me the bill. Yvette chose status, then watched it crumble. Trayvon chose escape, then disappeared. Harold chose honesty, even if it cost him a long marriage. Malik chose change after years of chaos. And I chose the truth. I chose to stop accepting disrespect as the price of love. I chose a life where my value is not up for debate at someone else's table. That is my story, exactly as it happened in front of me, and that is where it ends. If this story hits you, don't just scroll. Subscribe for more real, intense betrayal and comeback stories, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that love without respect is a trap. And comment real love if you believe loyalty should never be negotiable. The end.